From Sci News, apex predator with weak bite. From prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you love talking about animals, and share this show with everyone you know. Now, let's get into the animal news of the day. Saurosuchus galeli, a large loricatan pseudosuchian archosaur that lived in South America 230 million years ago during the late Triassic epoch. It's like mid Triassic. Late starts around somewhere between 220 and 225 million years ago. Was thought to be an apex predator due to its size and diet, standing at between 5 to 8 meters or 16 to 26 feet in length and weighing over 250 kilograms. That's a bit of a small in terms of weight. This would be a skinny Saurosuchus. Saurosuchus could reach over 1,300 pounds or somewhere around 600 kilograms. However, the new analysis of Saurosuchus galeli's skull and comparisons with the later well-known dinosaur Allosaurus, found that despite their similar skull strengths, Saurosuchus galeli had a much weaker bite than the dinosaurs that followed it. That is interesting that they're comparing it with Allosaurus. I would have expected maybe another member of the Paracrocodilomorphiae lineage of pseudosuchians. Um, and yeah, this also because specifically like the animals that I'm talking about, the pseudosuchians, which is a huge lineage of reptiles, were not dinosaurs. They were descendants of the archosauromorphs, just like the dinosaurs, the birds, but they were their own distinct lineage. It would branch off also into different families, not just the loracatans, the proterosuchians, the rauisuchians, which are probably one of the most famous of the pseudosuchian lineage. Specifically, the animal Postosuchus is rauisuchian, which is a very distant relative to Saurosuchus. Okay, so where were we? But I am just shocked that they're comparing it with Allosaurus. Saurosuchus galeli would have had a bite with the force of one 1,015 to 1,885 newtons, I'm guessing, equivalent to modern crocodiles called garrels. Whoa, that is weak because garrels are they're the thinnest or most narrowest snouted crocodilian of today. They mostly only feed on different species of fish. They don't usually go after mammals. If they do, it's probably something like a mouse. Um, and then you have the freshwater crocodile over in Australia, which has a somewhat similar jaw structure to a garrel, but they will go after bats, but bats don't really put up much of a fight. Okay, let's see. For a comparison, Allosaurus had a bite force of 3,572 newtons. Saltwater crocodiles, yeah, that's a massive increase. Um, that's huh. Saltwater crocodiles have a bite force of 16,000 newtons, and Tyrannosaurus Rex. Oh yeah, compare this guy with T Rex. It's bad enough with saltwater crocodile. It's bad enough with the Allosaurus in this instance. Why do we keep going up? Yeah. Also, saltwater crocodiles are far behind T Rex, like not even close. So let's just skip that. I wonder if the other stuff's biased too. Oh, okay. So here's the crocodilomorph. This is it's a paracrocodilomorph, not a true crocodilomorph. Even the Rauisuchians, like Postosuchus, were quite distantly related to the crocodilomorph. Even though there were crocodilomorphs that were part of the Pseudosuchian lineage, there were many different subfamilies of the Pseudosuchians. So this is just a reconstruction of Saurosuchus. Unlike other paracrocodilomorphs, or which remember I'm using the term parafort, so these aren't true. Anyway, these animals could walk on all fours, unlike animals such as Postosuchus, which only walked on two legs. Postosuchus did not have the ability to. It simply had two small forelimbs to support its weight. And the reason why I'm mentioning Postosuchus is because it's a well-renowned Rawasuchian because it was in the Walking with Dinosaur series. Saurosuchus popped up in Dinosaur Revolution, and this animal possibly could have hunted certain species of Dicynodont within the region, definitely smaller animals. It seems to have had somewhat of, well, at least of what we're looking at, a much um, weaker bite force than its Rausukian relatives like Postosuchus. But it definitely made up for that in possibly agility to an extent. So let's keep going. Yeah, it does have a long, thin, narrow jaw. Now, you can tell that this animal does share certain characteristics with Allosaurus and T Rex, not necessarily in the bite structure, but in these specific holes right here. So, this hole, which is in between the eye socket and the nostril, is known as the anorbital fenestra. And then this bottom hole on the bottom jaw is called mandibular fenestra. These two holes are archosauromorph traits. So these two holes you can find on modern day crocodiles and alligators, as well as every single bird, and as well as the dinosaurs. We found that Sarsuchus galili actually had an incredibly weak bite for its size and thus predated animals in very different ways compared to later evolving dinosaurs. In fact, despite being one of the bigger lizards and an apex predator, Saurosuchus galili had a bite that was on a par with the relatively measly bite of the Garrel. That's just sad. And much less powerful than more fearsome crocs and alligators around today. You would still have liked to leave Saurosuchus galili well alone. Oh, yeah, I mean, I definitely think he could still rip you apart. It would be a bit risky, especially once he comes into contact with bone, but he could do it. It's a 1,300-pound animal. All he has to do is just smush you. But they likely fed only on the soft, fleshy bits of their kills, as their bite wouldn't have enabled them to crunch up on bones. Um, Yeah, they tend to say like lions today tend to avoid the bones. That's not necessarily true. There are many instances where they're gnawing on the bones, and also when you look at animals like Allosaurus, there is more evidence, possibly recently, of at least different species of Allosaur come in contact with bone more than previously thought. Despite their relative size, Saurasuchus galili would have been a careful diner that used their back teeth to remove the flesh from their kills. In contrast to later dinosaurs, the feeding behavior of Saurasuchus galili is likely due to a weak bite and a more rectangular skull shape. It's just odd that they're comparing it with theropods. Why aren't they comparing it even with slightly distantly related crocodilomorphs? That would make more sense. And I think it would be more interesting too. So here's just another reconstruction. And this is an animal. So this is taking place somewhere around 229 to 225 million years ago during the Triassic. And this is Pisanosaurus. This is possibly, it's still heavily debated, but one of the first members of the Ornithischia lineage of dinosaurs. So this animal is also quite small at this time and quite bipedal. It probably only reached somewhere around 4 feet in length and also might have weighed around 4 pounds or 2 kilograms. It's probably feeding on, it might have had an omnivorous diet, so possibly feeding on plants, but even different species of bugs and small reptiles in the area. Whether or not it had feathers is up for debate. I don't believe it looks like we have any evidence for this animal having feathers, as well as most of the Ornithischia lineage later into the Mesozoic in general. Oh yeah, so here's also the distinct skeletal structure. Obviously, looking at the size of its arms, it wasn't able to support itself on four legs, but this animal has extremely long metatarsal or ankle bones, as well as a very long shin bone or tibia compared to the fibia or the thigh bone. So this was a very fast runner. I wouldn't doubt it could exceed speeds of over 25 miles per hour and possibly sustain those speeds due to the air sacs that it possibly had. And then here we have a member of the Ornithosuchidae lineage of the Pseudosuchians. So this is specifically um, Viticampasuchus, which only reached somewhere around 6 feet in length or around 2 meters, and probably weighed somewhere around 10 to, or no, ugh, I'm underestimating that, probably 30 to 40 pounds. This is also a bit of a distant relative to the Saurosuchus. And here's another. Older reconstruction is still a really good picture, but they do have a very distinct snout, which is also quite common in members of the Proterosuchid family of pseudosuchians. Okay, so also these earlier reptiles had thinner bones in their noses compared to the later Allosaurus. Yeah, I would assume so. You're talking about an animal only weighs like 1,300 pounds to something that could have weighed more than 3 tons. I mean, it can still happen where they have quite robust jaw structures compared to their body size, or let's say the nostril in this instance, but it's still odd, especially considering when you're looking at something like a theropod dinosaur, it's going to be much different compared to Saurosuchus in this instance. Saurosuchus galili would certainly have been a fearsome reptile until it sat down to eat its prey. I actually would think that would be where it's quite calm. But anyway, and we can see how evolutionary details in the skulls of these massive apex predators necessitated significant differences in eating behavior. While dinosaurs that followed in the Jurassic period would have eaten the vast majority of their kills, Saurosuchus galili may have left more complete carcasses, which would have provided a secondary meal for carrion feeding animals too. The problem is with this type of a feeding strategy is that you need to have it where there's like every single time this animal dines, it has to be a fresh carcass or a fresh kill. And much of the time now, due to it being a reptile and most likely it being cold blooded, it's probably not going to need food as often. So this probably isn't as harmful to it as something like a predatory dinosaur. You have animals like Dilophosaurus and Cryolophosaurus during the early Jurassic period, somewhere between 180 to 190 million years ago, they had quite weak bite forces, so they would have a much hard time. But it's also possible with those carnivores, they might have been feeding on fish. And it hasn't mentioned whether or not specifically Saurosuchus could have also possibly been an opportunist and fished as well. Um, but yeah, also like Dilophosaurus and Cryolophosaurus would have needed to eat more as well as pretty much staying focusing on those two guys because they were cold blooded. I mean, because they were warm blooded. It is truly amazing how similar the skulls of top predators in the Triassic period, the time before the domination of the dinosaurs, looked compared to the well-known carnivorous dinosaurs such as Tyrannosaurus rex. Um, Technically, the dinosaurs already dominated the Earth by 210 million years ago, but I'd say around 200 million years ago is when you started having much larger predators, especially. But let's see. However, unexpectedly, we found that the bite power of these Triassic predators were far weaker compared to the post-Triassic dinosaurs. Still not a good comparison. Oh, and the last animal is the Hyperadapodon. Now, these animals are a member of the Hyperadapodontidae lineage of proto-mammals that existed during this time. So, this is a relative of the larger Dicynodonts in the region that occurred during the Triassic. So, this is around 229 million years ago. And these animals were most likely herbivores, and they were toothless. They just had a distinct beak. And they had earlier relatives during possibly the end of the Permian period, around 252 million years ago, when their family first evolved. But they would end up suddenly going extinct somewhere around 225 million years ago. So, shortly before animals like Postosuchus would emerge, and they were also only about 3.5 feet in length. So, let me know in the comments what your favorite species of Triassic reptile is. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you love talking about animals, and share this show with everyone you know, because nothing is better than all animals all the time.